welcome, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And I want to thank you so much for dropping by this Sunday, this holiday weekend Sunday. You could be doing a million other things, but I'm so glad that you are willing to spend some time to delve into this very important issue in our nation on affirmative action. Last week, we dealt with the political earthquake that was the Dobbs decision. And just this week, the SCOTUS has managed to create a tsunami once again by striking down years of educational progress with affirmative action, and not just educational progress, but workplace progress as well. There was a study conducted by the Harvard Kennedy School of Public Policy. It was conducted over 4 key states that had eliminated affirmative action. And that study ranged from 1990 to 2009. It examined California, my home state of Michigan, Nebraska, and Washington. After these states banned affirmative action, workforce participation decreased 7% among Latino men. Black women's participation decreased 4%. And Asian women's participation decreased 37%. Now, the study noted that the figure among Asian women was particularly large because few Asian women were in the workforce. And what I'm thinking is that perhaps they weren't in the traditional workforce as we know it. Maybe they were in entrepreneurial type settings, owning their stores and things like that. The study's 19-year duration allowed researchers to examine the share of minorities and women that worked in state and local government before and after affirmative action bans went into effect. And I'd mention all of this just to show you that there has been studies done. There are disparities when affirmative action has been taken off the table. The lawsuit that went before the Supreme Court was that we're dealing with now with the banning of affirmative action was presented by the Students for Fair Admissions, also known as SFFA. An Asian male student was at the forefront of this lawsuit. And I think, my opinion, that somehow there are certain groups in our country that feel that they are white adjacent. I'm going to bring up my awesome panelists for this evening. They are movers and shakers and thinkers, and 2 of them you know and 1 of them you may not. So first up, I'm going to bring up Dr. Derek Reed. And Derek is a practicing dentist in Elkhart, Indiana. He is a native Detroiter. Moment of transparency, Derek and I and his identical twin brother grew up down the street from one another, and we went to high school together at Cass Tech.
Yes, sir.
He is a graduate of the University of Detroit with a degree in chemistry and is a proud alum of Meharry Medical College School of Dentistry. He has been active on the show in the chat, so now he's up on the screen offering his words of wisdom and opinion live and in person. Welcome, Derek, to the show.
Thank you, Pam. Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yes. I'm so happy to have you. Okay, and next up we have Latrice Davis. Latrice is our regular guest on the show. She is a senior court clerk at Queens County Civil Court in New York. She is also an appointed member of Queens Community Board 6. She serves on the Aging, Social Services, and Disabilities Committee. Latrice is also a former journalist with the Associated Press. Welcome back, Latrice.
As always, thank you for having me. Good evening, Derek.
Good evening, Latrice.
All right. And last but certainly not least is our lawyer and constitutional scholar for the evening is Narissa Smith. As I mentioned, as I mentioned, Narissa is a lawyer, speaker, teacher, and journalist. For over a decade, Narissa worked as a law professor. She taught criminal law, U.S. constitutional law, and classes such as critical race theory. She understands the many ways the American legal system perpetuates racism, sexism, and other forms of inequality. Welcome back, Narissa.
Hello. Yes, long time no see. It was just last week. But when this decision came out, I knew I had to come back. So I'm happy to be here.
You said you were waiting for this. That's what you said. That's what you told me. Well, listen. So I'm going to start first with Derek, Dr. Reed. I'm so used to calling you. Look, he put Derek.
I'm good. I'm good.
You know, when people are very secure with themselves, they don't care,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. So listen, what were your first thoughts when you heard about the affirmative action ban? What did you think? Because you went to a PWI undergrad. So I'm curious, what was your thought process?
When I heard that Clarence Thomas, no surprise, was one of the ones who voted it, I mean, it's almost like you saw it coming with everything that's happened in the past 5 or 10 years. It's almost like, like not to off on a tangent, like Trump. Trump is no accident, you know, and a lot of Republicans, in my opinion, feel the same way that he does. They just can't voice it because they got someone ignorant like him to do it for them. But I mean, when I first heard of it, I mean, it brought back when Lloyd Connolly, if I recall his name correctly, was advocating for affirmative action in California and Michigan. His name is Lloyd. I think it's
Ward Connolly.
Ward Connolly, you had it right.
Lloyd
Yes.
Connolly. So it's
light-skinned black gentleman.
Yeah, and he's on the same boat as Clarence Thomas. You know, we have an even playing field now, so it's no longer needed, and it's never been even. It will never be even. So to see it come to fruition, I mean, right behind Roe v. Wade, they're trying to take away all kind of things to women and minorities and people of color. So it didn't surprise me, but it's a sad state of affairs in 2023 to see that this type of thing is going on and being allowed to go on to further push us back to where we were years ago.
Derek, one more question for you. Do you feel that your experience at a PWI, University of Detroit, influenced your decision to attend HBCU Meharry Medical College of Dentistry?
Yes and no. There was a guy at my church that at the time he heard I was applying to school, he said, "Doc, I went to Meharry." He said, "I want you to consider Meharry as a choice." And I had knew about Meharry's past, where at one time we produced half of this nation's physicians and dentists. And so at University of Detroit, which is a Jesuit university, when I was talking with my advisor for him to write my recommendation, he asked me, he said, "Derek, did you apply to University of Detroit Dental School?" I said, "Father Albright, I didn't." That was my advisor, Father Albright. And he asked, "I didn't." I said, "Well, because the 5 years I've attended here, I made it my business to go and meet the incoming Black students, not dents, student that they allowed into the University of Detroit." I said, and to be honest, I find it hard to believe in a predominantly Black city like Detroit that you guys put in one Black student a year in dental school.
One?
Yes, and in a good year too. In the 5 years I was at UAD undergrad, I made it my business to meet the incoming Black students, to see what the experience was, to see what I could look forward to in dental school. And in the 5 years, they only did 2 Black students in 1 year. All the students I talked to felt like that they were glad to be in dental school and they were making it, but they felt they had no support. So I told Albright, I said, I didn't even apply because I don't think I would get the support here that I would need. Now, I didn't apply to Meharry because it was a Black school, but I thank God every day I went to Meharry. Because some students brag about what schools they went to, where they place that in the percentage when it comes to board scores. But when a person comes to your office and they're hurting, they don't care about your board scores. They want you to put your hands on them and get them out of pain.
That's true.
And so I love that Meharry really, they hazed us, but it made me realize what I had to put up with afterwards. We had to be twice as good as our counterparts. I've been out the country a couple of times learning how to do dental implants, and with other American dentists that came over with us, though I'm a student to learn too, I was over there teaching American doctors how to suture.
Mm.
They have been practicing longer than I have. Meharry really, I mean, Meharry, I was a little, they left a bit of taste in my mouth, but as I get out here and so I had to put up with, I thank God every day I went there.
All right. Okay. Latrice Saint, you're a proud graduate of NYU.
That is correct.
Okay.
Which is a PWI, just like the University of Detroit, as Dr. Derrick is describing.
Yes. Do you, and you don't have to, let's see. I keep hearing people say, well, just go to an HBCU. That's what I've been hearing here, because I'm in North Carolina, and we got a ton of HBCUs around me, and they're wonderful. But I don't think, personally, that's not the answer. That can't be the answer to solve the problem.
I would agree with you.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? Being that you went to a PWI, because you, like me, I didn't know to go anyplace else, truth be told. And I'm a lot older than you, though. Mm-hmm. So what was your experience, and what would you say to that?
Well, I went to NYU because, as you know, I was born and raised in Brooklyn. And also, when you stay in state, you get more financial aid.
Yes.
Given that I was pursuing a career in journalism at the time, guess what the media capital of the world is? I live here. I was here. So it made sense for me to stay in state where I would get more financial aid. Mm-hmm. Also, unlike, say, North Carolina or, other places, there are no HBCUs in New York State. Mm-hmm. So again, that's not necessarily an option for me. I mean, I look back on my time at NYU as a good experience. I navigated highs and lows like everyone else. Mm-hmm. But, I think getting rid of affirmative action, I find ironic, because the unspoken thing about it is who benefits the most from it. It's not myself. It's not Narissa. It's not even Dr. Derrick or you, Pam. Mm-hmm. It's white women.
I know. We've got a whole video on that.
That's the thing I find mind-boggling, and it ties into Roe v. Wade, because, again, that is what finally got white women to wake up and realize, oh, they're not just coming after us. Mm-hmm. They're coming after you, too. Mm-hmm. And so getting rid of affirmative action is just one of many dominoes that are in place. I mean, we talked about this before, the Republicans have been playing the long game for the longest. They're not going to stop at this. This is just the beginning for them. They're basically, as I've said before, Trump's rise to power gave certain people permission to come out of hiding. Yes. Whether it's Ron DeSantis or Greg Abbott, and these are elected officials. That's the scariest part. These are elected officials I'm talking about, not Joe down the street or Bob around the corner. These are elected officials. These are people in positions of power,
right,
that are making decisions that are going to affect not just us, but our offspring and their offspring. What's happening right now is going to be felt long after I'm gone, and hopefully I'll live a long life. But
it's crazy. It's crazy. So, Narissa,
yes, ma'am.
From a legal perspective of how we obtained affirmative action and why, to how we no longer have the federal guarantee, what do we do? Take us through a quick synopsis journey, if you will, of affirmative action, why it existed, and until now that we no longer have the federal guarantee, what that means.
All right. Well, first of all, one thing we have to be clear about, and can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. The first thing we really need to take a look at is two different types of affirmative action. One is in the workplace, and the other is in college admissions. And the Supreme Court, this ruling applies to obviously college admissions. So we could get into a whole lot in talking about the ramifications for the workplace that could happen from this case. But what we know for a fact right now is that this is affecting college admissions. So when you go back to that, you really got to start in 1978 with this case called Bakke versus the University of California
Regents.
Yes. So there was this white man named Alan Bakke, and he was upset because he didn't get in to, I can't remember, I think it was the medical school at one of the UC schools. And he was very angry because they had a system that said, like, it was a hard percentage, like 15% or a certain number had to be students of color, et cetera. So he sued. And the Supreme Court back in 1978, they said two very important things. Number one thing they said is that schools can't have quotas. Why am I pointing that out? Because if you look at the anti-affirmative action tirades that we've seen, and they pop up, remember California when they did, I think it was Prop 8 or whichever one it was, in Michigan when they did the other prop to get rid of affirmative action not too long after, people will still believe that there's like hard quotas. That hasn't been the case for almost 50 years, you know, in a little while. So first of all, we have to make sure that we're pushing back against the narrative that they're pushing because it's incorrect, number one. Number two is that what the Supreme Court said in a very split-ish decision, they said, well, even though universities can't use hard quotas, what they can do is to consider race as a factor in college admissions. And so Bakke was the law of the land for a very long time. But here's something that we also need to know. Now, if you know your Black history, you know that Brown versus Board of Education wasn't just some random decision. No. First, Charles Hamilton Houston, when he became the dean of Howard Law, of which I am a proud graduate, he said, I'm going to train these lawyers to dismantle segregation. And his star pupil, of course, being Thurgood Marshall. They sat up on the task and set out on a journey to dismantle segregation, but they started at the top. They said, we're going to go for the grad schools first, you know, because these are adults. They said, because by the time we get to K through 12, what's going to end up happening is these white folks going to lose their mind if they think that their little white children have to go to school with little Black children. And they knew that. They were well aware of that. And even though Charles Hamilton Houston didn't live to see the fruit of his labor, we all know what happened with Thurgood Marshall and Brown versus Board of Education and all of that. Why am I going and delving into that? Because these white conservatives, the people that you name checked at the beginning of the broadcast, Pam, they wanted to take the same strategy. So what you see is after Bakke was decided, you see them doing just like what they did with abortion, playing a long game, filing all these cases. There was one called Fisher v. Texas. The Supreme Court kind of punted on that, but it was a very mediocre young white woman mad because she didn't get into the University of Texas. And they, and so they had, you know, on procedural grounds, they said, no, not yet. In 2003, before that one, though, that was the big one. That was Grutter and Gratz versus Bollinger. So you had the University of Michigan Law School and the University of Michigan undergrad. And the undergrad had a point system that would assign a certain number of points based on whether you were a legacy. We need to come back to that. Your race, your zip code, your in-state status, what kind of honors and awards you got as a high school student. Whereas the law school considered race, but they said, no, we're going to look at it holistically. So in 2003, the Supreme Court said, yes, affirmative action is constitutional and places can use it. But if you do, you got to be like the law school. You can't use hard numbers and assign a number to somebody's race. You just can't do that. But it can be part of a number of factors that you look at. More importantly, they said that diversity was a compelling state interest. If you're going to have a race-based program, it has to be narrowly tailored to a compelling state interest. So they said having a diverse student body, especially in law school, was a compelling state interest that would justify that. Why am I telling y'all all of that? What we have now is we don't have support for diversity being that compelling state interest. And what does that mean? That means that admissions are going to change. Now, of course, if you know any admissions professionals, they tell you guys that they've been waiting for this, they've been kind of preparing for this, and there's ways to sort of sneakily still account for race, like looking for zip codes, looking for other things. And the Supreme Court, the one silver lining is they did say that schools could still consider race as part of that holistic applicant review. So if somebody writes in their essay, you know, I'm a first generation Black student, they can take that into account, but it is still a blow to know that they can't take that openly say we're using race because we want to make sure that we don't have just one Black person sitting in the classroom that has to speak for all Black folks. And I know all of y'all attended PWIs. I'm a double HBCU grad, but my K through 12 education experience was as white as a Trump rally. So I understand what it's like when they start talking about slavery and other stuff. And they be like, ooh.
She grew up, hey, Derek, she grew up in that Grand Rapids area.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people, when they think of Michigan, they think of Detroit and they think chocolate.
Yes.
Our girl Narissa did not grow up in that, so she did double HBCU.
All right.
Just a quick question: is Grand Rapids like considered part of the Upper Peninsula? Because from what I understand about Michigan, yes, Detroit is heavily Black, but once you go north, especially in the Upper Peninsula, it's Trump land.
Well, no, the Upper Peninsula is really white, but the Lower Peninsula, the Mitten, as we call it, is there's a lot of Black folks. We live basically pretty close to Chicago. There are actually a lot of Black folks in my town. It just wasn't in my high school. In my neighborhood, even, it was just a lot of older Black folks. Their kids had already gone through the same high school that I had gone through. So they were all grown. So had I gone through 5 to 10 years earlier, I would have had probably a different experience. But quick side note on something else that's going to affect things. The reason that is because that was one of the first streets that they let Black people live on in the subdivision where I grew up. So all the Black families were living on our street. So our street was majority Black, and the neighborhoods and the other streets around were more white. But that's just, you know, a fun thing, you know, when you talk about housing discrimination, how they would do that. So yeah, heavily Black neighborhood street that I grew up on, very white school experience.
It's, you know, we know that this action is going to have ripple effects and ramifications all throughout, and it's going to, it's a lot to think about. Derek, at the top of the show, I spoke about the Harvard Kennedy School study in the 4 states that had, after they banned affirmative action, and its impact on the diversity in the workplace. Now, Marissa's explained to us that thus far, the case that we're dealing with is the affirmative action ban in education. But, you know, it's just a slow walk, right? Because literally this week there was I couldn't show the story because I would have had to pay for a subscription, but 4 diversity officers in big structures,
I saw that. Yeah,
all gone, except, now I will say this, the exception was the Netflix situation, because they didn't get rid of the position. A Black man is taking the lady's place, so she is stepping down and just doing the consulting thing. But the other 3, there's no explanation. They're gone. And so I was told, and I was told this about 5 or 6 months ago from one of my dear friends in media, as I am. And he said to me that some of these DEI positions, they had some CEOs come to them and said, after they saw this hiring they were doing of Black and brown people, they said, that's enough. Literally, somebody, he didn't tell me the corporation, they said that's enough. So I'm telling you, things are really getting weird. So anyways, Derek, I digress. Okay. So its impact on the diversity of the workplace. Share with me your thoughts, because do you work as an independent dentist in your office, or how was your setup? And that.
I work in a private office because I did work the last 7, 8 years with a corporate office, and corporate is just concerned with the money. I mean, I'm in business to make money, but not to any means, you know. So I run an office with a doctor who's retired, but he owns 2 offices. I run one, and another doctor runs another.
Mm-hmm.
But I have complete autonomy where I'm at. The funny thing is, it's this part of Indiana is very, for lack of a better word, strange. I'm one of only 5 Black doctors in the South Bend area, and 2 of those doctors are retired. Some are retired. Keep in mind, in this country, at any given time, there's 126,000 dentists in this entire country.
Mm-hmm.
Out of 126,000 dentists, only 300 are Black.
What?
I'm sorry, 3,000.
3,000. Okay.
Out of 126,000 dentists, 3,000 are Black.
That's a shame.
And I've been doing 25 years now, and it doesn't surprise me that people, they come in and they see that I'm a dentist. But even with the help in the office, I've been running this one office for 2 years, and when I first came there to work, they look at me as if, how is this guy a dentist and he's Black? But then once they, I mean, that's the gist I get almost anywhere I go outside of Nashville. Mm-hmm. And then it's almost like I have to win them over with I don't win them over, but they see my skill set and they realize this guy's legit. I had to do a working interview with the office 5 months into the pandemic, and I went to an office to primarily do their oral surgery. They had a dentist that was there like me. He was a young guy, oral surgeon. I told this guy I've been doing oral surgery since I left Meharry. And once he saw me do oral surgery, he said, "Wow, Doc, you look so comfortable." And I said, "Dude, I've been telling you, I've been doing surgery for the last 25 years, but you have to prove yourself." Mm-hmm. They can see, you know, like I tell people, affirmative action is not like we won a lottery. Mm-hmm. And somebody gave us something.
Right. Yeah. Let me correct them on that. That is absolutely correct, because you and I, Derek, went to Cass Technical High School, one of the top high schools in the
country. Yes.
And,
yes.
And the premier school in Detroit, Michigan. Let me tell y'all, when I left Cass Tech, I thought I was pre-med, right? Obviously, I'm not pre-med. You know, I'm in media. Mm-hmm. So, but when I left there and went to the University of Michigan, I was able to create buffer solutions and all kinds of stuff in University of Michigan's women's gynecological endocrinology labs in the hospital. I was doing that from my high school education in chemistry. Mm-hmm. And I was not, so no, we're not getting picked to go to these universities because we won a lottery or something, that we didn't deserve it and that we had no place to be there. I had that from high school. Not when I learned in Michigan. I was a freshman doing that. Okay. Yes. So I don't have a mic to drop, but I'll drop my pen because we got places. We are in institutions because we deserve it, and we graduated and we did well. Yes. And so this nonsense about you're taking my place or whatever. Look, boo, I had a whole bunch of other interesting factors about me too. So forget that. You know, that whole nonsense about what affirmative action is, taking somebody else's place that and you don't deserve it. Mm-hmm. How dare you? That's racist in and of itself.
Yeah, and that's actually, I wanted to go to and use some of my critical race theory bona fides and say that a lot of the debate around affirmative action is heavily rooted in the myth of Black inferiority. Mm-hmm. And there is an assumption that we are less than. Yep. And when it comes to less than, there was that guy that wrote the book, The Bell Curve. And then one of the co-founders of the DNA genetics, you know, he was trying to prove that Black people are less intelligent, when the reality that we know is that intelligence is equally distributed amongst folks, you know, regardless of their skin color. Things like addiction, are equally distributed. But when you talk about Black folks, you have to talk about the situations in which we find ourselves due to what's happening to us in this country and the racial wealth gap and all of those other things. Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Yes, I couldn't think of the names right then. But yeah, so when you talk about that, you have to be very, very careful about what we're saying. Because one thing when I taught constitutional law that I was very careful to point out is that in those University of Michigan cases, every last student was qualified to be in that university. But that is the assumption that when you are Black, you always have to prove, no matter where you went to school, you always have to prove that you belong somewhere, because the assumption is that someone who is white is a harder worker, smarter, better, stronger, a better team player, whatever that means. So we're always fighting against those things. And so what the Supreme Court has just done is basically said, you know, oh, well, you know, if you can, you know, you can cut it then. But the other thing, I'm so glad y'all mentioned Cass Tech. I know about Cass Tech because I got cousins and friends from college who went there. Also, you know, friends who went to maybe Brooklyn Science up in New York. I have friends who went
Brooklyn
to
Tech.
Young in Brooklyn, in Chicago. There are, and there's Benjamin Banneker in DC. There are some great public schools that our Black children can attend. But we also, the worst thing, I think there's a couple of worst things about this decision is they have lied to us because they're acting like everyone is on an equal playing field, but they're not, because our students are far more likely to go through K-12 schools that are underfunded, and the students are overwhelmed. They might have one counselor for like 500 students, or maybe no counselor or school. So one of the things that we are going to have to push for as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, community members, wherever, dog owners, I don't care. We have to fight for them to put our kids' education first, because that was one of the fallouts from integrating schools. White folks, what they did, and it was very sneaky, they did two things. First of all, we know about the white flight. That was the more obvious thing. They moved out to the suburbs into mostly white neighborhoods. You might get a few little chocolate drops coming through every once in a while, but not enough to really rock the boat. But what they also did was they started sending their kids to private schools. So what you see is, as the same time that the tax base for our Black schools was eroding, you have less people going there. And now you also see another push by the Republican Party. Now they want to privatize public school. They've been on that for a long time.
Charter schools.
Again, from Grand Rapids, not charter schools.
Charter schools here in North Carolina. Tell them, Larissa.
They just passed a law in North Carolina where they want to make it easier to give vouchers, public money, to parents to send to school. And people, you know, if you don't know the situation, you think, oh, that's great if you want to send your kid to a private school. No, because it's taking money from the public schools that need it, but also it's funding for these white parents to put their kids in these racially imbalanced private schools. Now, keep your eye on this. Out there in Oklahoma, what they have done, now it's probably going to fail, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be scared at the fact they're trying. They have done for the first time a charter school. Charter schools are considered public schools.
Yeah.
They have given permission for a religious charter school in Oklahoma. So it's going to be a religious school that is funded with public tax dollars. Under the First Amendment, that is supposed to be one of the huge no-nos, right? Like maybe they can share teachers, they can share maybe supplies, but to give public money directly to a religious school, that has been a barrier the Supreme Court has kept pretty intact. But we need to be very careful and very aware, because this is an activist court.
Yes,
now, I'm not going to take us off, but one case that Black folks need to be aware of that we haven't talked about is they said that that web designer didn't have to make a website for a gay couple. We need to all be watching that.
So we're going to do that on a whole nother.
Oh, yes. But what I'm saying is that it's just further proof of what their agenda is. They want to make this into country that aligns directly with white evangelical right-wing beliefs,
Christian nationalism.
And yes, and but so now if they take this and we bring this into, let's say, an academic setting, or with affirmative action being gone, you want to apply to Bob Jones University, and they want to say, well, we only believe that God grants the right to education to white students. It kind of we could see a whole bunch of stuff being really ridiculous. And I picked Bob Jones because back in the day, they actually had a rule that said that students couldn't interracial date. And if you were interracially dating, you get kicked out of school. And they only stopped it because the Supreme Court said they would lose their IRS status. So just watch these things. Just watch. I've been talking too long. Let me shut
up. You're seeing, actually, you're seeing a lot of this play out now with Moms for Liberty. I mean, it's no coincidence that they've risen to such prominence in such a short period of time, and they've narrowed their focus on the school curriculum. So with charter schools, yes, they're receiving public money, but they control the curriculum.
Yes.
Exactly. And so it's only one more step away from having the curriculum be reading, writing, arithmetic to reading, writing, arithmetic, and religion. And that's the worrisome thing that has been the line we haven't crossed, that Oklahoma is daring the Supreme Court to let them do. And we're living in a very unpredictable time because, and I have to say this, in last show, I said I was beating it like a dead horse. I done resurrected the horse, about to kill him and beat him to death again. Gotta say this. If this did not happen in 2016, if Hillary Clinton wins that election, we will be talking about a decision that upheld affirmative action and maybe gave some folks some more rights, and we will be doing some other things. Because let's also take it back to using my history in 1968 when Nixon wins. Now remember, we had that good court that gave us Brown, gave us all those other things.
The Warren Court
elected, and that was the Warren Court. Then we get the Burger Court when Nixon comes in and starts appointing these conservatives. Right? That's where it really starts. So then Bill Clinton tries to do. So remember, it's Nixon, Carter's in there for a hot second, right? Then you get 12 years of Reagan and Bush. Clinton does what he can. He gets Ruth Bader Ginsburg in there, all of that. Obama does what he can, trying to increase the number of women, giving us the first Latina. But then when they pulled those shenanigans with Merrick Garland's appointment at the end of the administration after Scalia died and went to a very hot place, I know for a fact. And then all of that stuff happened. We have to vote. I cannot emphasize this enough, that we would not be having this conversation if we had President Hillary Clinton in November 2016.
That's right.
Because Merrick Garland would have been on the court. We would not be dealing with this ridiculousness. I don't want to blame Black folks because white supremacy, Trump should have never even gotten within 100 yards of that White House, like a restraining order. However, and that was white folks that helped him on his ascent.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that's not on us. That's on black. That's on white people.
Yeah,
because we knew America knew Trump for what he was all along, and even now, that's not on us.
I agree with that. However, if you also look at the data, and people don't like to see this, if we had even 10,000 or 15,000 more Black folks vote in Detroit, in Cleveland, in Philly, Trump does not win. We need to stop participating in our own damn oppression.
And we need, but here's the thing, not only do we need to vote, we need to vote at all levels, especially the local level. We need to be engaged and informed about what's going on. Because to get back to affirmative action, my theory is that the Asian student that you saw in the press conference, he's a pawn.
Yes.
He's a pawn. Basically, what we talk about white supremacy is predicated on pitting groups against each other. Yes. So Asians are seen as the model minority, quote unquote, however you want to see that. And anyone who knows me will tell you, I hate the word minority. I don't use that word at all because minority by definition means less than. I'm no less than anybody else.
Right.
And, I have
we are the majority.
Well, here's the thing. I think back in the 90s when I was at NYU, I remember hearing and reading things about how by the year 2020, we would be the majority. So I think that's a culmination of what you see playing out right now.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you pit you pit blacks against the Asians and against the Latinos or whatever they choose to call themselves. I mean, it's a divide and conquer tactic as old as time. And so I think
it absolutely is. Yeah.
Now,
I also have to. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I want to ask you guys. I can't remember what governor it was, but he was advocating for us having affirmative action. But one thing he mentioned was maybe we need to increase the court by 3 jurors. Is that going to make a difference?
Yeah.
I don't think so. And I'm glad you brought that up because I read all the time, I think, chatter about expanding the court. I'm open to the idea, but I am more in favor of term limits. That would be my personal approach to addressing this issue. I'm not sure that expanding the court would help us because, okay, I'm sure we're all familiar with the saying, be careful what you wish for.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that I don't think it would hurt. Like I said, I'm open to it, but I'm really keen on installing term limits because, again, the damage that these decisions from this year and last year, they're going to be felt for generations.
Oh, and can I just say, here's the thing, though. Term limits would be hard to get because you have to change the actual Constitution because the Constitution says it's a lifetime appointment. And it's easier, however, to pack the court because there's nothing in the Constitution that says it has to be 9 people.
I agree with that.
FDR was the first one who said that when they were blocking all of his social programs during the Depression, and he was trying to do all these economic programs to stimulate the economy. And he said basically to the Supreme Court, if y'all don't get right, I'm going to just go ahead and just add 6 more y'all that I will personally handpick who just might be more inclined to agree with me. And then all of a sudden they caught religion, if you will. So they call that in law like the switch in time that saved the 9 because one of them flipped and started, supporting Roosevelt's programs. But the thing that we have to be careful about, I agree with the careful what you wish for, but I do think that this would give Biden at least the political clout to make that argument. People have been making that argument, especially in legal spaces, for a long time. You also have to have the political will. And
Biden was against it. He was against it at the beginning. He thought, when Biden came in,
he was publicly against it.
He was. He thought that dude, y'all know me. I'm Biden. I've been in this. I've been here forever. All my life, I've been here serving. And he really thought that they wouldn't go against him the way they have. And so he finally has gotten the memo, I think. But great. Listen, the chat has been jumping. I love it. You guys are putting some great comments in here and everything.
Mr. Valentine is correct. Term limits have been found to be unconstitutional for Congress. And that's also because they tried to pass it as a law instead of amending the Constitution, because the Constitution doesn't have term limits. And I'm glad we're talking about the Constitution because I really hate when Black folks talk about conspiracy theories. White folks don't think enough about us. I'm telling y'all from my critical to have a conspiracy, because that means you want to hide it. They do it out in the open. And I always say the biggest conspiracy out in the open. Exactly. The biggest conspiracy is the United States Constitution and the way that it's structured. I have made it my mission in life to make sure we know how the Constitution works so that we can find and exploit these things. Now, what I was saying before is that now Biden does have a way to do it. He can drop another 9 justices, Democratic appointed, onto the Supreme Court if he gets some buy-in from Congress. But of course, this current Congress, which has, even though it's sliver thin, it has a Republican majority. We're not going to get that. So we have to vote. I cannot emphasize this enough. It's not just about the president. Yes, it's not just about the president. It is about, and I'll just give this quick analogy, even though I hate him, I know that people will understand it better than who actually know is the best basketball player and team of all time, which is the Detroit Bad Boys of 89 and 90. However, Michael Jordan did not won a championship since I've been born. Don't tell me that you're talking about the Knicks now. Come on.
Well, here's the thing. I get that you want to support Detroit, but in terms of the greatest player of all time, that would be Jordan. When you think about everything he did for the sport, for his team, for the league, and the sport of basketball, bad boys can't touch. And mind you, I'm a Knicks fan, so I mean, like, it pains me to say that, but I got to give respect where it's due. You have Jordan, and then before him, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But anyway,
we digress. Listen,
taking the Jordan though, what I was going to say, Jordan did not win a single championship until he got Pippen behind him, and then he had to get Rodman behind him. So I want folks to start thinking about the president as more like someone who has some authority, but really it's limited. So think about how Jordan didn't start winning championships, you know, and narrowly beating Detroit in the Eastern Conference Finals with some assistance from the rest. To be able to get to that, he needed that support. Kobe didn't really win without Shaq. So what we got to do, we got to keep Biden in there, number one. But we have to give Biden an overwhelmingly Democratic Senate and Congress so that he can get his agenda through.
Yes.
But there's one more thing that needs to be added to that. We also need to start preparing the pipeline. Like, assuming that Biden lives and he gets reelected, he lives both terms. You know, Harris is the presumptive nominee. Right. Okay, who's behind her?
Right. I feel you. We got to have our strategy down packed and tight. We really, we really do. Listen, the chat is going great. Judy's comment here: Biden can only accomplish court packing if he wins a second term. If the Senate is not Republican controlled for 2024. The Republicans have a new game plan: use the Muslims to go against the LGBTQ and pretend that they are now like Muslims. But remember when? We must think, people. Okay, and then
and the crazy part about that is that Islam is not technically a homophobic. People need to learn and research some stuff, and I can't.
Okay, Biden is not predisposed to take the type of executive action that I agree. Attorney just lost credibility invoking bad boys and government.
Thank you, Greg.
Greg,
no,
stop hating.
I will stand by Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, Vinnie Johnson, John Sally, and Dennis Rodman being one of the greatest teams of all time. I will stand by that.
If anyone is aware of what Isaiah Thomas did with the Knicks, that in and of itself, nah, man, no. We ain't going there. We ain't going there. I got love for y'all, but we ain't going there.
Just so we're clear, Biden is no progressive.
No, he's not. No. But here's the thing: Biden never said he was.
No, he never.
I think that's something to keep in mind.
What he is.
Go ahead, Latrice. I'm sorry, I didn't want
No, I wanted to say Biden never said he was progressive. I think, like Obama, he's doing the best he can with the tools he has at his disposal. But he never claimed to be progressive.
Exactly. I would agree 100% with that. But also, we have to get out of this jam of trying to think that we need perfect people who align with every single thing that we believe before we feel like voting for them. I don't care if Joe Biden is in a walker and a wheelchair and a hover scooter simultaneously in 2024. I'm still voting for him. Right. Because look at the alternative. If you think exactly, if you think it's bad now, imagine how bad it will be with what this Supreme Court is doing if Trump gets another bite at the apple.
Oh, please, I can't.
You already
not just Trump, but DeSantis. I don't want him anywhere near the White House either.
Anybody with an R next to their name should not again be allowed within 200 feet of the White House as far as Black folk are concerned.
That's right. That's
right. I said Black folks. Go back to one other thing that was brought up about Asians being the model minority.
Yeah.
a lot of the leading critical race theorists are actually one of the three people who is credited with starting critical race theory, Professor Derek Bell, who was Obama's professor at Harvard Law,
Right.
and this Japanese woman named Mari Matsuda, and her Black husband, Charles Lawrence, and another Latino gentleman, Richard Delgado, right? So it's like those four really like form the core of the beginning of that movement. And like if you read a lot of the Asian American critical race theorists and a lot of how Asian Americans vote, they vote far more aligned with Black folks. Black folks tend to be like at about 90% voting for liberal policies. Asians are very next close, about 75 to 80%. So the majority of Asian folks understand that it's a hot lie. But there is this, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to hear what other folks have to say. But there's this brother named Eugene Lee Yang. He's a comedian, actually, but he's one of the Try Guys. He did this great video about the history of anti-Asian racism and immigration, all of that. And it really breaks down not just the myth of the model minority, but how white folks try to exploit that to do exactly what Latrice had said, which is to pit non-white groups in this country against each other. I highly recommend that people try to check that out because we need to understand that most Asians actually are not happy about this decision either, because they understand the real deal and they understand that it's only a very few elite Asian groups, like folks coming from certain places in like China, Japan, and India, who are really coming over here with like on a high level. Folks who are coming from some of the poorer Asian countries actually fare worse than native born Black folks. And that's saying a lot because they're struggling when they come over here. So there's, first of all, the Asian community is not a monolith because folks come from all different places there, but also just to understand that most of the Asian folks know that white folks are trying to play them and they don't want to buy into that stereotype.
All right, so let's get back to, we had to have some laughter because this subject is so heavy, and when you think about it, it can really weigh you down. I have a video I want to show you. Let's do the video first, and then I'm gonna come back to this question about the PBS special. Let me see. Let me share this. Okay.
The Nationalist Tour. The Supreme Court Justice just deemed affirmative action unconstitutional and made you idiots on the right think it's about fairness and merit. The same fairness and merit that got C student Jared Kushner into Harvard because his daddy pledged $2.5 million to the school, a wealth he acquired by being a white-collar criminal. That fairness and merit. The same fairness and merit that makes colleges like Harvard University admit legacy students at a rate of 33%. That means if your rich mommy or daddy or grandpappy went to the school, you get in too. Fairness and merit. And to all the white women, conservative white women out there, the loyal sidekick to this kind of bullshit, this affects you too. Because you know who benefited the most from affirmative action? White women. But you guys vote against your own interests all the time. What the fuck do you care? I'm really sorry that the boots of rich people must taste like green bean casserole because you poor Republicans love to lick them. Tap into your racism.
Can you please drop the link to that video somewhere? I want to make sure I can see that. That was hilarious.
It was. I will. I'll have to do that for you guys. Oh, there's been.
I want to follow her.
Subjects. Let's see. Ooh.
I'm gonna step out for a second.
Okay.
I'm still listening though.
Yes, Bad Boys Detroit Pistons, the only team who knew how to handle Jordan. Oh God.
The Jordan rules.
The Santa right scary. I don't know what Edwin was trying to say there. I voted for Biden. He will probably do so, but I'm growing tired out here. You can't get tired.
Steven, I feel you.
Can't get tired. You just got to hold on. You got to hold on.
I'm gonna keep putting one foot in front of the other because that's all I can do. But it's like,
Americans have some serious divisions. It is the elitist Asian that are getting too much play.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they're focusing on. Yeah.
It's like thinking all Latins think alike. There are some serious struggling parts of Latin America. Oh, we know that. It's not a monolith. Loretta, positive thoughts. We will have both Democratic control houses. That's right, Soror. We're gonna have it.
Can I respond to Miss Loretta? Because I'm thinking that actually, if I tend to be, believe it or not, with all my work on racism and Black history, I read stuff all the time that is depressing, but I tend to be an optimist. That's my natural state. And one of the thoughts I had after first being really kind of disappointed in the Supreme Court, I mean, I knew it was going to happen, but still being disappointed when you actually see it happen. I think silver linings in between the abortion decision, which folks are still mad about because now they're actually seeing the fallout in their own states, and this affirmative action decision and that student loan decision. I think I was like, thank you, Supreme Court. You just activated three of the core constituencies that the Democrats need to win: young women, young folks, and Black folks. Because now if people could say it was a game, it's like, okay, I think a lot more people are waking up to realize politics is not just like a hobby you can engage in every 4 years. I think people are now starting to see that, yes, if you have the wrong people in power, they can take things away from you that really matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting back to my questions. Okay, so this one I've got for you, Latrice, and of course, Derek, you can chime in on this. All of you can, but I suspect that Latrice has seen this or seen a snippet of it. Just I'm thinking there's a PBS documentary entitled Clarence and Jenny Thomas: Politics, Power, and the Supreme Court. Within it explains what I call Clarence Thomas's self-hatred and his utter disdain for who he is as a Black man in America. I've only seen the clips, but y'all, it explains his disdain for affirmative action. I mean, his utter disdain. And it's so stupid because his whole career has been predicated on affirmative action.
George Bush only picked him because the only Black dude on the court resigned.
Right, because he retired, and then God bless him, he died, and then he was rolling over in his grave when Stephen Fetchit got in there. And it's so, Latrice.
Yes.
Had you seen any of those clips?
No, I have not. I've read about it, and in terms of Clarence and Jenny Thomas and what the shenanigans they've done over the last 30 plus years, none of it surprises me. It only saddens me because, again, the damage that they're doing is going to be felt for generations to come. The dark money that his wife has been accepting. And even though she's not an elected official and she's not on the court, she clearly has a lot of sway. I mean, and like, I would consider her a non-state actor, like, the Koch brothers or, Harlan Crow, which we learned about recently. Like those folks like that are the people you really need to watch out for, because they may not have this, they don't have the title of an elected official, but they have money. And they use that money to buy what they want. In this case, Harlan Crow bought Thomas, and Thomas is too stupid to realize it. But still, that had already caused damage. Even before Harlan Crow came to prominence this year. Again, dark money, Citizens United. I mean, like I'm on the community board right now. This is my second term. I see myself doing one more term. I wouldn't want to do this forever anyway. Like at some point, you have to pass the baton and let the youngins come up and do what they need to do. So that's one of the reasons why I favor term limits. You don't want to stay in one place too long and become too entrenched. Look no further than Senator Feinstein out in California. I don't want that for myself, but that's a whole nother conversation. But to answer your question, no, I haven't seen the clips, but I am sadly familiar with Uncle Ruckus and the damage he has done.
Derek, have you seen any of those clips or read about him? About
I
what
haven't.
he thought was about how he put a 15 cent
A
stamp.
10-cent stamp, yes. I saw something in the past.
Yeah.
I saw it yesterday. And I mean, even when I think he was elected to be the department chair for the EEOC.
Yes.
And he really didn't want anything to do with that because it kind of stipulated that he was doing something along for black people, and maybe he was appointed to that. I mean, it's like Judy said, he's very damaged. He has a lot of self-hatred that, I mean, for him to sit there and say, in a sense, that we no longer need affirmative action and that this country will do the right thing. They haven't done the right thing up to this point. What's going to make them start doing it now? You know,
And the only thing, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, go
No, I was gonna say the only thing I would add about Clarence Thomas is the fact that I've talked to several people who've met him in real life and in person, and he seems like a normal black man until you get to, you know, his beliefs. And it has to do with, again, though, there was somebody who tried to tell us, and I haven't seen these clips, but I saw a video with her the other day, Anita Hill.
Yes, Anita Hill,
and her livelihood and everything to tell us that this man wasn't about nothing. Wasn't about nothing. And people didn't listen to her. And all I gotta say is to remind us that when black women is trying to say something, people need to listen. Not because we're special, but because we usually right. Because if you're gonna step out on a limb to sacrifice yourself like that, you have something that you have to say. But people, that just made him more attractive to some people, as like a martyr, you know, for racial justice or something.
Well, he said that he was in a high-tech lynching, and that reverberated. Remember,
that was a high-tech lie.
It was a high-tech lie. But his and then what got me about some of the clips that I saw was that they said that he literally wore overalls. He wore he looked like a absolute idiot,
like a country bumpkin,
of which he really, you know, he didn't have to be. You know, he could have dressed. I mean, he didn't have to dress the nines, but he had on his overalls, looking a chicken, a driving, doing the thing, you know, that kind of look, and it was just ridiculous. And I'm like, he seriously has mental health issues. Needs counseling.
Well, the sad thing about him is that he believes about affirmative action that he's not, even though it's hard to explain, that he knows he's qualified, but something in him tells him that if I'm qualified, why do I have to be put on something or be conjoined to something called affirmative action?
Yeah. Well, he kept even as a Supreme Court justice, he's kept all the rejection letters that he got from all of the firms that he applied to and didn't get in, just because. And then that's what made him put the 15-cent stamp on the back of his diploma from Yale. And I'm saying, dude, it's because they don't want black people there. It's not because you don't have the credentials. They just don't want you there. And it does not matter where you got that degree from necessarily. It is supposed to even the playing field. But, you know, it is what it is.
Man, when I go to dental conferences, more times than not, I'm one of either a few black doctors there or the only one. And I walk up and I sit in the front.
Yep.
That's right.
I walk up there because I want them to know.
You earned that seat. You earned that seat at the table.
I'm no fluke. I'm supposed to be here. And someone look at me like, you know, that dude kind of bold. Why am?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right, homeboy. That's right. Listen,
well, bold, you're Dr. Derek. You know.
Yeah,
that's right. Sidra Watkins says, my question is, what was he promised by gaining the seat? Something ain't right.
He sold his soul. That's it in a nutshell. Clarence Thomas sold his soul to get that seat on the Supreme Court bench. He sold his soul.
And not only that, but also, I mean, if you look at, like, it's interesting that you said he saved those rejection letters, because the other rejection he's never gotten over, I think it might have been, I don't remember if it was Howard or Harvard, but he was going to come and speak there not too long after he got appointed, and the black students wasn't having none of it. I'm pretty sure it was Howard. Yeah. Howard. And he has never, he feels like black people should be kissing his feet. He also is mad at us because we don't love him. And
He doesn't own himself.
He gets to put out a
There you
decision
go.
like this, then it's sort of like a I'm gonna show y'all sort of thing. Meanwhile, he further ingratiates himself to the white folks, which we know that he loves. So that way, so it's a twofer for him. He's punishing the people who don't like him, and also it's an opportunity to say, "Look at here, boss, ain't I good? Look at this good thing, boss."
And the jiving, doing the
Wasn't
thing.
there?
Yeah.
Wasn't there
I think he's worse than Step and Fetch It. Step and Fetch It didn't have a lot of intelligence. He's more like I can't think of the character's name, but Sam Jackson's character from Django Unchained, Leonardo DiCaprio's butler, that's what it was like.
Wasn't there a 10-year period that he didn't make a decision?
He
on the
didn't
bench?
speak. He
didn't ask a question.
He didn't speak. You did, I remember they made an announcement when he spoke from the bench. It was
like, wow, he talks.
It was like exactly. I remember it made national news. It made national news. Black afraid because Bush said he would not appoint any other black. Oh, that he wouldn't appoint any other black person other than shucking the jive and doing the thing. Thomas. Maybe that's
isn't Clarence Thomas's wife? Isn't that Bush's niece or something?
No, Clarence Thomas's wife is not related to the Bush family.
Judy Davis, our classmate, Derek. And I always ask questions.
You should always ask questions.
That's right. Clarence Thomas is a reflection of the people who raised him. You know what, Loretta? I don't know. I don't think that's true because, I was listening to his mom, being interviewed and stuff, and they were saying that the people around his parts in Pinpoint, Georgia, whatever, they don't even talk about him. It's like it's like they're shamed, but I think that he is Thomas is just messed up in the head.
No, he hates his mom. And he hates his sister. His sister, who is a nurse, was trying to get support from the state of Georgia, while this man is on the Supreme Court. His sister is struggling to care for their aging mom. And I think it's also like some kind of trauma he had. I don't know if their mom was a single mom, I can't remember, or if the dad left or died or whatever, but he hates his mother. His mother, I don't think they've spoken in 15 years or like something like that. So he's got a lot of self-hatred going on.
But her girl bought his mom's house, so they've had to have some kind of interaction, I would think.
But I'm saying it hasn't been recently though. And so I think that if basically what he is now is not what his mama, we can put a lot of stuff on him, but don't put that on his mama because his sister has been, that's not how we was raised to be. And even as a young man, Clarence Thomas was a Black Panther.
He was a black. I was going to say that was the other thing, that he was a pro-black, whatever, spouting all this stuff. So I don't know.
So we can't put it on his mama. We can put it on a lot of stuff, but his mama is not in the line of people who should get that.
And Anita tried to warn us, and God help us. There's no talk about Obama being appointed to the Supreme Court. I've heard people say that. I don't know.
I think Barack Obama enjoying his Netflix producer life. He don't want to do that.
I wouldn't want to do it either.
I don't. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Stephen, about the interracial marriage. I mean, they're not helping with affirmative action.
At one time, he didn't even believe in interracial marriage.
Who?
Clarence Thomas. I read that the other day.
I would love to hear his first wife talk about him, but she done remarried and probably trying to forget about him.
Can you blame her?
Wouldn't you?
Can you blame her?
Does it make you want to have that Men in Black thing that just go do 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 do? You just forget everything.
Oh gosh. Well, listen, clearly it appears that we're gonna have to do a part 2 because that whole case that the other case about the website and all of that, I can't get over that. I cannot get over that.
I read an AP article today that the guy who was referenced, he said he's been married for the past 15 years to a woman. He never
No, it was totally false stuff. So we got to get into that. Let's see. Freedom Butler says our Black leaders are afraid that we would not have a Black on the Supreme Court after Marshall, and they went along with Bush.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Okay. Well, listen, guys, I have enjoyed all of you as always. Chat people, you've been wonderful. Thank you for your participation. You know, I'm always looking for people to come up on stage or whatever. You see my email address on the scroll there for new participants and what have you. Derek, it's great to have you up on stage and not in the chat.
There you go. My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, class.
Thanks for inviting me.
Listen, we have not seen each other. We've seen each other online, but not on picture, whatever. But I appreciate you guys. And next week, I think I'm going to do a part 2, but we're going to get into the that website case with the LGBTQ situation, because that was crazy.
Yeah, and that's gonna trickle over to a whole lot of other things that people not even thinking about.
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm telling you. Whenever you start talking about white folks in religion, especially these days, you have to be really careful to think about how are they going to use this, because that was one of their justifications against interracial marriage that came up in Loving versus Virginia, where the Supreme Court of Virginia literally said that if God had wanted folks to interracial marry, he wouldn't have put us on different continents. And then, it's a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm telling you, we need to be worried about this affirmative action case for sure, and the student loan case, because that's a whole other thing. But this whole thing about they opened this Pandora's box of being able to use your religion to allow you to discriminate against people, and that ought to terrify us.
Yeah, I am terrified. I think I'm gonna see if I can't get Reverend Dr. Jonathan Augustine on here to talk about Christian nationalism and that whole intersection with because he's also a lawyer too. He's also my pastor, so he's I've had him on before. He's something. But anyways, guys, listen, I have enjoyed you. We're going to do a part 2 of this. We have to, because they just given us so much to talk about. And the whole premise of me starting this show was to get you to think, so that when it's time to go to the ballot box, that you will be energized and motivated how to vote righteously for yourself. Period. Yeah, Derek, go ahead.
One quick thing. That LGBTQ thing, it was already legal last year under Pence when he was governor. Almost an identical case.
Really?
Where a person wanted to, they were
Masterpiece Cake Shop. Yep.
Yes.
The bakery. Yep.
And so Pence passed a law as governor, what they just passed nationwide, that this person had to make a cake for somebody who was same-sex marriage. So that's been a law here for at least prior to Pence becoming vice president.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Well, anyways, guys, I have enjoyed you. Have a safe July 4th. We really celebrated, but if you want to go look at the fireworks, look at the professional fireworks. Don't be fireworking on yourself, okay?
Right.
Burn down somebody's house.
Right. All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, you guys.
Good night.